Welcome to Forbidden Love channel, where secrets unravel and hearts collide. Sometimes we don't notice how effortlessly life slips into a quiet, predictable groove. The same faces staring back at us across the breakfast table, the same motions guiding us through the day, the same tired words filling the silence. It's a rhythm so familiar it lulls you into a trance, until one day, out of nowhere, someone or something crashes into the heart of that ordinary existence, flipping everything upside down. Suddenly you're left trembling, wondering, am I living the right way? Maybe this new presence is a whisper, a nudge, hinting that life should pulse with more than just the comfort of stability. I didn't even realize when my world began to shift. Not long ago, everything with my husband, Jack, felt solid, unshakable, until Ryan Caldwell stormed into my life. That's when I saw it. Stability could hollow out into something empty, something brittle. I didn't know then how it would all unravel, but looking back now, I see it clear as day. It was the beginning of the end. I'm Emily Carter, 32, tethered to the sun-soaked sprawl of Austin, Texas. That morning started like every other, the alarm's sharp cry jolting me awake, a mug of steaming coffee cradled in my hands, and a long, vacant stare into the bathroom mirror. Jack, 35, my husband of 8 years, was already gone, swallowed by his job at some downtown tech firm. Our mornings had shrunk to a handful of rote phrases. "How'd you sleep?" "Fine," before he'd vanish out the door. I'd gulp down the last of my coffee, then dash out of our tidy suburban house, perpetually late for Horizon Media, the ad agency where I'd carved out a decade-long career. That place was my second home, a buzzing hive where I'd earned my stripes as a senior copywriter. My work fueled me. Every campaign, every hard-won nod of respect from my colleagues lit a quiet fire in my chest. Then there was Ryan Caldwell, 38, the new creative director who'd swept into Horizon 6 months ago like a gust of desert wind. He wasn't your typical boss, all stiff suits and barked orders. No, Ryan had a way about him. Tall, with tousled chestnut hair and eyes that cut like steel under the Texas sun. His voice, low and steady, seemed to weave through the air, pulling everyone into his orbit. He'd already claimed his authority, not with force, but with a rare magnetic knack for knowing just what to say, just how to connect. I still remember that first real moment with him. I was buried in a stack of papers at my desk, the hum of the office fading into white noise, when a soft knock snapped me upright. "Emily, got a sec?" His words rolled out smooth and sure, a quiet command wrapped in velvet. I looked up and his gaze hit me, sharp, unguarded, like a spark igniting dry brush. My breath hitched, a sudden heat flooding my veins. "Sure, Ryan, come in," I said, forcing calm into my voice even as my pulse thundered. He slid into the chair across from me, his presence swelling the room like a storm cloud on the horizon. We talked, campaigns, deadlines, ideas, but beneath the surface something simmered. His words weren't just instructions. They tugged at me, stirring a restless ache I hadn't known was there. When he left, I sat frozen, staring at the empty chair, my mind reeling with a question that wouldn't let go. What just happened? The air in the office shifted after that first encounter with Ryan. It was subtle at first, like a ripple spreading across still water, but I felt it, a tingling unease that clung to me long after. He'd left my doorway. I tried to bury it, chalking it up to the chaos of new leadership, the pressure of looming deadlines. But deep down, I knew better. Ryan wasn't just a boss, he was a spark, flickering dangerously close to the dry tinder of my life. Days bled into weeks, and with every meeting, every glance, that spark grew hotter, brighter, threatening to ignite something I couldn't control. He had this way of commanding a room, his voice slicing through the chatter, his presence anchoring the team like a steady hand on a storm-tossed ship. I'd sit there, pen poised over my notepad, pretending to focus while my thoughts spiraled. His words danced around me, sharp and deliberate, but it was his eyes that pinned me in place. Those steel grey depths glinting with something unspoken, something that made my stomach twist and my breath catch. I'd catch myself staring, tracing the line of his jaw, the casual confidence in his stride, and then I'd snap back, flustered, praying no one noticed the flush creeping up my neck. It wasn't just his looks, though God knows he had those in spades, with that tousled hair and a smile that could unravel anyone. It was how he saw me. At home, Jack's attention had faded into a distant hum. His hugs perfunctory, his words clipped, his focus lost to the grind of his own world. But Ryan, he'd lean over my desk, his voice low and warm, saying things like, "Emily, you've got a real gift for this. Don't let it go to waste." Simple words, but they landed like a jolt, stirring a hunger I'd forgotten I could feel. He made me feel alive, noticed, wanted. And that was a drug I didn't know I'd been craving. The tipping point came one humid Austin evening, the kind where the air hangs thick and restless. We'd been grinding through a big campaign, and Ryan suggested coffee after hours to hash out some ideas. His tone was casual, professional, but there was a glint in his eye, a dare wrapped in innocence. "You free around 7?" he asked, leaning against my office doorframe, his shadow stretching across the floor. My heart thudded, loud and insistent, screaming at me to say no, to cling to the safety of my routine, but my mouth betrayed me. "Yeah, that works," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor racing through my limbs. We met at a dim little spot downtown, far from the office's prying eyes, a cozy nook with flickering lights and the faint hum of jazz. Ryan shed his work armor there, his tie loosened, his laugh freer, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. We started with shop talk, pitches, clients, timelines, but the conversation twisted, spiraled, until we were spilling pieces of ourselves. He told me about his early days in Chicago, chasing dreams through sleepless nights. I confessed how I'd once wanted to write novels, not ads, but settled for the paycheck. His gaze softened, locking onto mine, and then he asked, "How's life outside this place? Emily? You don't talk about Jack much." The question hung there, heavy, probing, and my throat tightened. I could have lied, painted a rosy picture of domestic bliss, but his eyes demanded more. "It's fine," I murmured, the word tasting hollow, bitter. He nodded, but that glint in his stare told me he saw through it, through me. That night, driving home under a bruised Texas sky, I couldn't shake him. His voice echoed in my skull, his every gesture replaying like a film stuck on loop. Those long fingers brushing his coffee mug, the way his lips curved when he laughed. My palms gripped the steering wheel tighter, my chest aching with a restless, reckless heat. Jack was asleep when I slipped through the door, his snores a soft drone in the dark. I stood over him, watching his chest rise and fall, guilt prickling at the edges of my mind. But it wasn't enough to drown out Ryan. That coffee wasn't just a meeting. It was a line crossed, a door cracked open to something forbidden. From there, it snowballed. Our talk stretched longer. Our glances lingered, heavy with unspoken promises. One evening, alone in the office after everyone else had trickled out, he brushed past me, his hand grazing mine, accidental but electric. My skin burned where he'd touched, my pulse hammering so loud I swore he could hear it. "You're still here?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, teasing but laced with something darker. "Couldn't leave this mess unfinished," I shot back, forcing a laugh, but my eyes betrayed me, darting to his lips before I could stop them. He stepped closer, the space between us shrinking, charged, until I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. "You're too good at this. Emily," he said, and it wasn't about work, not really. I swallowed hard, my resolve fraying, unraveling. Then came the night that broke everything wide open. We'd stayed late again, poring over proofs, the office silent save for the hum of the AC. Ryan offered to drive me home. It's late. No sense in you walking alone, he said, his tone too gentle, too loaded. In his car, the air crackled, thick with tension. We barely spoke, the quiet amplifying every breath, every shift of his hands on the wheel. When we pulled up to my house, he cut the engine and the silence roared. He turned to me, his eyes molten, searing. "You're quiet tonight," he murmured, and I felt the weight of his stare like a physical touch. "Just tired," I lied, my voice barely a whisper. But then he leaned in, slow, deliberate, his hand brushing my cheek, soft, tentative, yet blazing with intent. "Emily," he breathed, and that single word shattered me. His lips found mine, tender at first, then hungry, desperate. I melted into it, my body igniting, every doubt incinerated in that searing moment. When we pulled apart, gasping, his eyes locked on mine, fierce, unyielding. "I've wanted that too long," he said, and I knew I was lost. That kiss wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, a plunge into a current I couldn't fight. Jack faded to a shadow in my mind, and Ryan filled every corner, vivid, consuming. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew one thing: there was no turning back. That kiss in Ryan's car didn't just mark a line crossed, it tore open a chasm inside me, one I couldn't stitch back together no matter how hard I tried. The days that followed were a blur of heat and shadow, my life splintering into jagged pieces I barely recognized. I'd wake to the same Austin sun spilling through the blinds, the same coffee brewing in the pot, but everything felt different, tainted, electric, alive in a way that terrified me. Jack moved through our house like a ghost, his presence steady but distant, his voice a faint echo against the roar of my thoughts. I'd catch his eyes across the breakfast table, warm and unsuspecting, and guilt would claw at my chest, sharp and relentless. But it wasn't enough to stop me. Ryan had ignited something, a wildfire I couldn't douse, and every step I took pulled me deeper into its flames. At work, Ryan and I danced around each other with a careful, practiced ease. We didn't speak of that night, not directly, but the air between us crackled, charged with a secret too heavy to name. A brush of his hand as he passed me a file, a lingering glance across the conference table. It was enough to set my skin ablaze, my pulse racing like a runaway train. I'd sit through meetings, nodding at the right moments, but my mind was elsewhere, tangled in memories of his lips, his touch, the way he'd whispered my name like it was a prayer. I'd tell myself it was nothing, just a fleeting lapse, a moment of weakness I could bury. But the lie tasted sour, crumbling the second I saw him stride into the office, his confidence cutting through the chaos like a blade. The pull grew stronger, undeniable. We started finding excuses, late nights at Horizon Media, poring over mock-ups in the glow of computer screens, the office emptying out until it was just us. Those stolen moments were intoxicating, each one a thread weaving us tighter together. One evening, as the last of the team trickled out, Ryan leaned against my desk, his voice low and teasing. "You're a machine, Emily. Don't you ever rest?" I laughed, a shaky sound, and met his gaze, those steel-grey eyes glinting with something wild, something that made my stomach flip. "Not when there's work to do," I shot back, but my words faltered, drowned by the thudding in my chest. He reached out, his fingers grazing mine, and the contact seared through me, electric and reckless. "You're too good at this," he murmured, and I knew he wasn't talking about the campaign. The room shrank, the space between us humming with a tension I couldn't break. That was the night it stopped being just glances and touches. We stayed late again, the city lights flickering beyond the windows, and the conversation slipped from work to something raw, unguarded. I told him about the dreams I'd shelved, writing stories that mattered, not just slogans. And he listened, really listened. His eyes locked on mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "Why'd you give that up?" he asked, his voice soft but piercing, cutting straight to the hollow ache I'd ignored for years. Life got in the way, I said, my throat tightening. He nodded, but then he leaned closer, his hand resting on my arm, warm and steady. You deserve more than that, Emily. Those words sank into me, heavy and sweet, stirring a longing I couldn't suppress. Before I knew it, I was kissing him again, fierce, desperate, my hands clutching his shirt as if he could anchor me in the chaos I'd unleashed. From there, it spiraled beyond control. We carved out secret pockets of time, walks along Ladybird Lake at dusk, dinners at hole-in-the-wall spots on the edge of town, places where no one knew us. Every touch was a jolt, every kiss a plunge deeper into a world where nothing else mattered. Ryan's hands were fire against my skin, his voice a low rumble that drowned out the noise of my conscience. He'd pull me close under the shadow of live oaks, his lips tracing mine with a hunger that mirrored my own. And I'd lose myself in it, completely, recklessly. Those moments were vivid, pulsing with colour against the grey backdrop of my life with Jack. I'd laugh louder, feel deeper, breathe freer, as if Ryan had cracked open a part of me I'd forgotten existed. But the high came with a shadow. Every night, I'd slip back into our house, the quiet pressing against me like a weight. Jack would greet me with that same steady smile, his voice soft with concern. Late again, huh? And I'd nod, forcing a grin while my stomach churned. His touch, once comforting, now felt foreign, a reminder of the life I was betraying. I'd lie awake beside him, his breathing slow and even while my mind raced, replaying Ryan's hands on my waist, his whispered words against my ear. Guilt gnawed at me, a dull, persistent ache, but it was drowned by the rush of wanting Ryan, needing him, craving the way he made me feel seen. I'd tell myself to stop, to end it, to claw my way back to the safety of what I'd built with Jack. But morning would come, and Ryan's shadow would loom again, pulling me under. One night, after a clandestine dinner at a roadside diner off I-35, the tension broke wide open. We'd lingered over greasy fries and warm beer, the booth shielding us from the world. His knee brushed mine under the table, a spark that set my nerves alight. You okay? He asked, his voice gentle but searching, his eyes studying me like he could peel back every layer I'd hidden. I wanted to say yes, to pretend I wasn't drowning in this storm of my own making, but the words stuck. I don't know, I admitted, my voice trembling, raw. He reached across the table, his hand enveloping mine, firm and warm, and I felt it, the weight of his care, the depth of what we'd stumbled into. This isn't easy for you, he said, his thumb tracing circles on my skin, soothing yet searing. I get it, but I'm here. His words were a lifeline, but they also sank me deeper, tethering me to him in a way I couldn't escape. We left the diner, the night air cool against my flushed cheeks, and walked to his car. The parking lot was empty, the stars a faint smudge above the city glow. He pulled me to him, his arms wrapping around me like a shield, and I pressed myself closer, my heart hammering against his chest. His lips crashed into mine, urgent, consuming, and I matched him, clinging, clawing, lost in the heat of it. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a surrender, a vow I couldn't take back. When we broke apart, breathless, his forehead rested against mine, his breath ragged. I can't stop thinking about you, he whispered, and the words pierced me, lodging deep. I couldn't answer, but my silence spoke louder, because I felt it too, that relentless pull, that aching need. Back home, the contrast hit harder. Jack was there, as always, his kindness a knife twisting in my gut. You're working too much, he'd say, his hand brushing my shoulder, and I'd flinch, guilt surging like bile. I'd mumble excuses, deadlines, pressure, exhaustion, but his eyes lingered, soft and trusting, and it gutted me. Every touch from him was a mirror, reflecting the lie I'd become. I'd crawl into bed, the sheets cold against my skin, and stare at the ceiling, torn between the man beside me and the one who'd claimed my soul. Ryan filled my days with fire. But Jack anchored my nights with a quiet I couldn't bear. I was unraveling, thread by thread, caught in a war between desire and duty, and I didn't know how to stop. Each meeting with Ryan fueled the chaos, every stolen moment a brick in the wall I was building between me and Jack. I'd see Ryan's name light up my phone, a simple, "Hey, you free?" and my resolve would crumble, my body humming with anticipation. I'd meet him, lose myself in him, and for those hours the guilt would fade, swallowed by the blaze of us. But when I'd return, reality would slam back. Jack's voice, his touch, his unwavering faith in me, and I'd fracture a little more. I was a moth circling a flame, knowing it'd burn me alive, but too entranced to fly away. This wasn't just an affair, it was a reckoning, a storm I'd summoned, and it was only a matter of time before it consumed everything. The double life I'd woven was a tightrope, trembling under the weight of every step, and I knew, deep in my gut, that it couldn't hold forever. Each kiss with Ryan, each whispered promise, stretched the threads thinner, fraying the edges of the world I'd built with Jack. I'd convinced myself I could balance it all, the fire with Ryan, the steady quiet with Jack, the lies that bridged them. But the truth has a way of clawing its way out, raw and unyielding, and when it did, it shattered everything in a single deafening moment. The days after that parking lot kiss felt like a fever dream, my skin buzzing, my mind a tangle of Ryan's voice, his touch, his searing grey eyes. I'd float through Horizon Media, my fingers tapping out emails while my thoughts drifted to him, replaying the heat of his hands, the way his breath caught when we pulled apart. At home, Jack's presence was a dull ache, a shadow I couldn't shake. He'd ask about my day, his tone warm but distracted, and I'd answer in clipped half-truths. "Busy, you know how it is," my chest tightening with every word. His trust was a mirror, reflecting the woman I wasn't anymore, and I'd turn away, unable to face it. I'd lie beside him at night, his arms slung over me in sleep, and feel the guilt coil tighter, a snake sinking its fangs deeper with every heartbeat. Ryan and I kept up the dance, our meetings growing bolder, more desperate. We'd steal away to quiet corners of Austin, dive bars off South Congress, trails along the Greenbelt where the trees swallowed us whole. His touch was a lifeline, pulling me from the grey haze of my marriage, and I clung to it, reckless and ravenous. Every kiss was a defiance, every whispered "I need you," a vow I couldn't unmake. But the thrill came with a cost, a gnawing dread that shadowed every step, whispering that this couldn't last, that the walls were closing in. I'd push it down, drown it in Ryan's laughter, his arms, but it lingered. A storm brewing on the horizon. That storm broke on a Thursday night, ordinary until it wasn't parentsed. Jack and I sat at the kitchen table, the clink of forks against plates the only sound breaking the silence. I'd spent the afternoon with Ryan, his hands tracing my skin in a hotel room off I-35, and the memory clung to me, vivid and intoxicating. I'd come home late, mumbling about a client meeting, and Jack had nodded, his eyes soft with that unshakable faith I'd come to dread. We ate in quiet, the air thick with routine, until he reached for his phone, and then, in a move so casual it froze me, he picked up mine. My heart lurched, a sickening thud against my ribs. We didn't check each other's phones, never had, but there it was, in his hands, the screen lighting up his face as he scrolled. I watched, breathless, as his fingers stilled. The room went silent, a vacuum swallowing every sound but the pounding in my ears. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing, and I knew he'd seen it. A message from Ryan slipped through my defenses. "Miss you already. Last night was everything." Simple words, but they were a blade, slicing through the fragile shell of our life. Jack's head snapped up, his gaze locking onto mine, and the warmth I'd always known there was gone, replaced by a cold, blazing fury I'd never seen. "What is this?" His voice was hoarse, trembling with a rage he barely held back. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, just a hollow gasp, my throat closing around the lies I'd rehearsed. "Emily," he pressed, louder now, his hands shaking as he gripped the phone. "Is this from Ryan? Did you—" He stopped, the words choking him, but his eyes finished the question, sharp and accusing. I felt the ground crumble beneath me, my world tilting as the truth I'd buried clawed its way free. I could have denied it, spun some frantic story to shield myself, but his stare stripped me bare. There was no hiding anymore. "Jack, My voice cracked, frail and useless, and he cut me off, his tone dropping to a whisper that sliced deeper than any shout. "Just tell me the truth." It was a plea, raw and desperate, and it broke something inside me. "Yes," I breathed, the words spilling out like blood from a wound. "I was with him." The silence that followed was suffocating, a void swallowing us whole. Jack stared at me, his face twisting, shock, pain, betrayal flashing across it like lightning. His hands clenched into fists, trembling on the table, and I saw the effort it took to keep himself together, to not shatter right there. "How long?" he asked, his voice icy, a facade masking the storm I knew was raging inside. I swallowed, my mouth dry, the weight of my confession crushing me. "A few months," I admitted, each syllable a hammer blow. "It started with the campaign. I don't know how it—" He nodded, slow and mechanical, like he was piecing together a puzzle he didn't want to solve. "Do you love him?" The question hit like a punch, knocking the air from my lungs. Did I love Ryan? Or was he just a rush, a lifeline I'd grabbed to escape the emptiness I'd felt with Jack? My mind spun, a chaotic swirl of Ryan's touch, his voice, the way he'd made me feel alive, and Jack's steady hands, his quiet strength, the life we'd built now crumbling. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice small, honest. "I'm not sure." It was the truth, but it wasn't enough, not for him. Jack's face hardened, a wall slamming down between us. "You're not sure," he repeated, his voice rising, thick with anguish. "You've torn us apart for someone you're not even sure about." His words were a lash, cutting deep, and I flinched, tears stinging my eyes. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor, the sound jagged and final. I wanted to reach for him, to beg, to claw back what I'd destroyed, but my hands stayed frozen, useless. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but it was a hollow echo, meaningless against the wreckage I'd made. He paced, his breath ragged, his fists clenched as if fighting to hold himself together. "I trusted you," he said, his voice breaking, raw with the pain I'd inflicted. "I thought we were solid. And you—" He stopped, turning to me, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You were with him, behind my back." The accusation hung there, heavy and unanswerable, and I lowered my head, the weight of it crushing me. "I'm leaving," he said finally, his tone flat, resolved. "I need time. I can't be here." He grabbed his jacket, his movements sharp, deliberate, and walked out, the door slamming shut like a gunshot. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that swallowed me whole. I sank to the floor, my knees buckling under the enormity of what had happened. Jack was gone, not just for the night, but in a way that felt permanent, a rift I couldn't bridge. The house loomed around me, empty and accusing, every corner a reminder of the life I'd torched. My phone buzzed, Ryan, checking in, but I couldn't answer, couldn't face him. The passion that had fueled me was ash now, scattered by the wind of Jack's departure. I'd lost him, the man who'd been my rock, and for what? A fling, a feeling I couldn't even name. Hours bled into the night, the clock ticking a relentless rhythm as I sat there, staring into the dark. Ryan came later, his knock soft but insistent. I let him in, numb, and we sat on the couch, his hand clasping mine. But the fire was gone, smothered by the weight of what we'd done. "I didn't mean for this," he said, his voice low, strained. "I didn't want to break you." His eyes searched mine, but I had no answers. Only a hollow ache where certainty should have been. "I've ruined everything," I murmured, tears spilling free, "and I don't know how to fix it." He left, and I was alone again, the silence pressing in like a vice. Jack's absence was a wound, raw and bleeding, and Ryan's presence couldn't heal it. I'd chased a spark and burned down my world, and now I stood in the ashes, lost with no way back. The door slamming behind Jack wasn't just a sound, it was a fracture, a crack splitting my life into before and after. The house swallowed me in its silence, the kind that presses against your skull until you can't breathe. I sat there, crumpled on the kitchen floor, the cold tiles biting into my skin, staring at the spot where he'd stood, his face twisted with betrayal, his voice breaking under the weight of my confession. He was gone, and with him went the last tether to the world I'd known. The emptiness was suffocating, a void I'd carved with my own hands, and I was left drowning in it, gasping for a way out. That night stretched into an endless haze. My phone buzzed, Ryan's name flashing, his words a lifeline I couldn't grab. "You okay?" he'd texted, but I couldn't answer, couldn't face the man who'd been both my escape and my ruin. The passion that had once blazed between us felt distant now, smothered by the wreckage I'd made. I curled into the couch, the cushions swallowing me, and let the tears come. Hot, jagged sobs that tore through me. Jack's absence was a wound, raw and gaping, and every tick of the clock deepened it. I'd lost him, not just his presence, but the trust, the warmth, the quiet strength that had held us together. And for what? A fleeting thrill with Ryan that now tasted like ash. Days bled into one another, a grey fog I couldn't shake. Ryan called, his voice soft with worry, and I finally let him in. Not because I wanted him, but because I needed something to fill the silence. He sat beside me, his hand clasping mine, but the spark was gone, replaced by a heavy, aching guilt. "I didn't want this," he said, his eyes shadowed, searching mine for absolution I couldn't give. "I didn't mean to break your life." His words were honest, but they stung, a mirror to the chaos we'd unleashed. "I've ruined everything," I whispered, my voice cracking, fragile, "and I don't know how to undo it." He stayed, holding me through the quiet, but when he left, the loneliness rushed back, sharper than before. Ryan wasn't the answer. He was part of the fracture, a piece of the storm that had torn me apart. But I couldn't let it end like this. Jack was my anchor, the man I'd built a life with, and despite everything, I wanted him back. The realization hit me like a punch. I'd been a fool, chasing shadows with Ryan when I should have fought for what mattered. I spent those days alone, plotting, rehearsing apologies, clinging to a fragile hope that I could mend what I'd broken. I'd tell him the truth, all of it, lay myself bare and beg for a chance. It wouldn't be easy, maybe impossible, but I had to try. The guilt was a fire now, burning away the haze, and I latched onto it, letting it fuel me. When Jack finally came home, days later the air shifted, thick with tension, heavy with what hung unsaid. He stepped through the door, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. The sight gutted me, his exhaustion, his pain, all etched into the lines of his face. We sat at the table, the same one where he'd found the truth, and I felt the weight of his gaze, cold and distant, a wall I couldn't breach. "Jack," I started, my voice trembling but resolute. "I need to say something." He didn't respond, just watched me, his silence a blade hovering over us. "I'm sorry," I said, the words spilling out, raw and desperate. "For everything, for lying, for betraying you, for tearing us apart. I know what I did is unforgivable, but I want to fight for us. I've seen my mistakes and I'll do anything to fix this." My hands shook, clasped tight in my lap, and I forced myself to meet his eyes, pleading through the tears welling up. "We can rebuild, start over. I'll earn your trust again, I swear." The confession hung there, fragile and exposed, and I waited, breathless, for any sign of softening, any crack in his armor. But Jack stayed still, his face unreadable, a fortress I couldn't storm. The silence stretched, unbearable, until he spoke, his voice low and weary, cutting through me like glass. "Emily, I've thought about this, over and over, trying to find a way to forgive you." He paused, his hands tightening into fists, and I saw the struggle in his jaw, the battle he'd already fought. "But I can't. You lied to me. You went behind my back with him. I don't know how to live with that." His words were a hammer, smashing the hope I'd clung to, and I flinched, the air rushing out of me. "I understand," I whispered, my throat closing around the pain. "But maybe, just maybe, we could try. I'll do whatever it takes." My voice broke, a plea I couldn't hold back. But he shook his head, slow and final, his eyes darkening with a sorrow that mirrored mine. "No," he said, firm now, unyielding. "I can't trust you anymore. Every time I look at you, I see it. Him, what you did. I don't want to live like that." Tears glistened in his eyes, but his resolve held, a wall I couldn't climb. "I've filed for divorce," he added, his voice dropping to a quiet, exhausted murmur, and the words landed like a thunderclap, shattering me completely. I stared at him, numb, my heart splintering as the reality sank in. "You'll start over," he said, standing now, his tone flat but heavy. "So will I. But not together. We're done." He turned, his steps echoing in the stillness, and left me there, the room swallowing me once more. I sat frozen, the silence roaring back, louder than ever. My fight had failed. Jack couldn't forgive me, wouldn't, and the life we'd shared slipped through my fingers like sand. I'd begged, bared my soul, but it wasn't enough. The divorce was a guillotine, severing us for good, and I was left alone in the wreckage, the pieces of my world scattered beyond repair. I'd chased a spark with Ryan and lost everything, Jack, our marriage, the stability I'd taken for granted. Now I was adrift, hollowed out by my own choices, with nothing left to hold on to. Jack's final departure left me stranded in a house that felt like a tomb, silent, hollow, echoing with the ghosts of what we'd been. The divorce papers arrived days later, a cold, legal severing of everything I'd held dear, and I signed them with trembling hands, each stroke a surrender to the ruin I'd wrought. I was alone now, truly alone, the weight of my choices pressing down like a storm cloud that wouldn't lift. Ryan faded too. Our texts dwindled, the fire that once consumed us snuffed out by the wreckage it had caused. What we'd had was real, raw, but it couldn't survive the fallout. I'd chased a spark and burned my life to the ground, and now I stood in the ashes, sifting through the pieces, searching for meaning. Looking back, I see it all so clearly. My marriage with Jack wasn't perfect. Cracks had formed long before Ryan, gaps I'd ignored instead of mending. I should have fought then, opened my heart to Jack, worked through the quiet drift that had settled between us. Instead, I ran, straight into Ryan's arms, chasing a thrill that blinded me to the cost. One choice, one moment of weakness, unraveled everything I'd built, and the price was steep. Jack's trust, our home, my sense of self, all gone. Ryan showed me passion, a side of life I'd forgotten, but he was a catalyst, not a cure. In the end, he was part of the mistake that shattered me. Now, sitting in this empty Austin house, I'm left with questions that haunt me. What if I'd been honest, with Jack, with myself? What if I'd faced the emptiness instead of fleeing it? The past is a locked door, but the lessons cut deep. I let desire drown out duty, let a fleeting rush destroy a steady love, and I'll carry that regret forever. My life's a blank slate now, scarred but open, and I can only hope to rebuild, to find strength in the ruins. To anyone listening, don't make my mistakes. If you're lost, if something's missing, talk about it. Fight for what matters, not against it. Honesty hurts, but running from it hurts more. It leaves you broken. Like me. Face your truths, build your bridges, and hold tight to the ones who matter. I didn't, and I lost everything. Thanks for walking this journey with me, Jarl. I wish you courage to choose wisely, peace to heal what's broken, and love that endures the storms. Take care and keep chasing what's real,